And as the bills roll in from the bushfire crisis, we are starting to see the government back down on this proposed budget surplus. We saw that from Josh Frydenberg yesterday. Joining me now is the Assistant Minister for Finance and Charities, Zed Seselja. Zed, good to see you. How hard is it going to be
Good morning, Laura.
to achieve this budget surplus?
Well, it's always challenging, and we know it's challenging because it's taken us a number of years to get the budget back to balance, which is where it was in the last financial year, and of course the forecast surplus for this financial year. So, and these challenges in responding to the bushfire crisis, of course, puts additional pressure on the budget bottom line. But what the Prime Minister has said is, whilst we have had a very strong commitment to fiscal consolidation, to delivering a budget surplus, that in responding to this crisis, the budget surplus has not been in his mind. What has been in his mind is the human challenges and the need to support communities right now, the need to fight the fires, the need to help to rebuild where there has been property damage, and of course provide support to those who have been affected. So that's been the government's focus, and of course the expenditure that goes with responding to the bushfire crisis does of course put challenges onto the budget bottom line. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, understandable it may be, but this sounds like it's no longer a promise.
Well, we will continue to work very, very hard to deliver on strong fiscal management and to deliver a budget surplus. There's no doubt about that. But what we're dealing with now and what the Australian people would expect is that we deal with the challenges to hand. Now, that involves immediate expenditure. It involves challenges for the budget, but one of the reasons budget surpluses are not there for themselves. They are there for a purpose, and the purpose, of course, is to be able to pay down debt, but also it is to be there to be able to deliver on the important things that the community needs and the Australian people need. And so strong fiscal management is what has allowed us to very quickly respond. We haven't had to put on levies or taxes to respond to this bushfire crisis, and that's as a result of years of strong fiscal management, strong budgetary management by the coalition government.
Now, of course, you're a senator for the ACT. You're in Canberra this morning. Now, Canberra isn't really known as a conservative stronghold, and there is a very strong opinions where you live when it comes to climate change. But given this bushfire season, have you detected a change amongst constituents that, you know, want to see the government take more action, or is it situation normal?
Well, look, you obviously get, I've had a lot of correspondence to my office around the bushfires, around climate change and around a range of other issues. But yes, certainly climate change and the fires, of course, has been a hot topic in terms of what the community are saying to me on the streets or indeed in correspondence. What I am saying, and as I'm responding to any concerns that are raised, is that we are very committed, very strongly committed to action, and we've got a strong track record, and we're continuing to build on that strong track record. So this argument that is put by some that Australia is not pulling its weight on climate change is simply wrong. It is not backed up by the figures. Not only have we met our previous targets, we are on track to meet our 2030 targets, and they are ambitious targets. 26 to 28% equates to around 50% per capita. So that means every man, woman and child in Australia would be halving their emissions by 2030 under our targets. Now, that's a stronger target than the European Union. That's a stronger target than many comparable nations around the world. So not only do we set very strong targets, but we deliver on them.
Might respond, and delivery is the key here, and that argument certainly is a valid one. But do you think the electorate, and particularly Conservative voters, would respond well to a longer-term target, perhaps net zero emissions by 2050, and not relying on those Kyoto rollover credits?
Well, what I think the community responds to is a strong plan that you can deliver on, which we are. And, you need strong targets. But let me give you one example of what we are doing that is streets ahead of the rest of the world. Investment in renewable energy in Australia is on a per capita basis ahead of all comparable countries, not just a little bit ahead,
but that commitment
by 3
was
and
given
4
to the
and 5
Pacific,
times.
remember, by the Prime Minister, that there will be a look at the longer term targets to 2030. Net zero emissions sends some within your party apoplectic if that was to be put in place by 2050.
Well, Laura, what I would say is that we have very strong targets for 2030. We're going to meet and beat our 2020 targets. We're going to meet and beat our 2030 targets. We are outstripping the rest of the world when it comes to renewable energy. So the message to anyone who's concerned in the community, if the concern is, are we doing our bit? Yes, we absolutely are doing our bit. We'll continue to do that.
Do you think that might be acceptable among some of the, I guess, more passionate members of your party?
Well, Laura, I'll leave that to the responsible minister to look beyond that. But what we've got are very, very strong targets on the table at the moment, very strong actions, renewable energy investment that is streets ahead of the rest of the world. And these people who buy into this argument that Australia's not doing their bit are simply not looking at the facts. So we are doing our bit. But of course, when it comes to times of bushfire crisis, it's not just about doing your bit on emissions reduction. It's, of course, things like hazard reduction. It's about building resilience. And fundamentally now it's about responding. That's what we've been working with the charity sector, of course.
You get a vote in the party room, Senator. Would you be comfortable with a net zero emission target by 2050?
Well, look, I'm just not going to get into sort of hypotheticals and things outside of my portfolio.
Well, the decision's got to be made this year.
Well, look, as I say, I'll leave that to the minister responsible. What I'm responsible for is charities, Assistant Minister for Finance. There's a lot in that space that I'm focused on.
And there is a lot, and I did want to talk to you about charities because Australians, indeed the world, has given so generously to the bushfire crisis and the relief effort. There was estimates of about $500 million being donated. Do you have some concerns about how this money will be divvied out?
Well, look, there are always concerns when there is, this very generous response, as you talk about, and we should be very proud of the very generous response of Australians. And indeed, we're humbled by the fact that many people in other parts of the world, of course, are contributing to this recovery. So those hundreds of millions of dollars and that money will continue to flow. Of course, people are free to donate to whatever cause they like, but I would say that if you are particularly concerned about making sure that that money gets to people in fire-affected areas, then there are some ways you can mitigate risk. So obviously a registered charity. So you can look up on the ACNC website whether they are a registered charity. So there's all sorts of regulation around that. So obviously we've got a lot of our large established charities who are on the ground right now doing great things. So whether that's the Red Cross, the Salvos, Vinnies, the RSPCA, so many other great charities, Anglicare, they are on the ground right now, and we had a forum with them last week where we were hearing about the immediate relief. So if you're concerned about it, that is one way of doing it. There is on the PMNC website, we are constantly updating those charities who are working in bushfire affected areas. They have charitable status. They also, importantly, have DGR status, which means you get a tax deduction. So the taxpayer or the government is splitting the difference with you when you make a donation, which is a great thing as well. So those are some of the ways you can do it. And the ACCC, of course, is the other avenue if you are concerned about scams or about organisations that may not be spending the money properly.
Yep, and no doubt the ACCC will be keeping right across that as well. Zed Seselja, thank you for your time. We might talk to you again next week to see how that is all tracking as well, because there's a lot of money flowing in, and I think there are some concerns that the money is not getting to everywhere that's needed. Appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Laura.